Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBTME.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second of our redo episodes. Today we are recording on Check the Facts. As a quick reminder, since it's been a while since we introduced the idea, this is our opportunity to both redo these episodes that we did at the beginning of the pandemic so that the sound can be better, because admittedly, before we realized that we were not going to be recording together again for a hot minute, the audio wasn't great for a bit there. So it gives us an opportunity to have it be done in better audio, and means that any ways that we've changed our thought processes, how we teach it, or how we experience the skill, we'll get a chance to include those this time around as well. But before we launch into checking the facts, all that it is, isn't, when to use it, etc., do want to call quick attention to the promotion this month, which is the Guilford Press Code. So if you guys don't know yet or have forgotten, we have an affiliate code with Guilford Press, who are the folks who put out the DBT Skills Training Manual, as well as so many other book titles, specifically on DBT and also on pretty much any other thing you can think of that's a mental health topic. So a couple of books that we wanted to highlight this month that you could use our code, which is DBTME at the checkout stand. Yes, where you are checking out the book, in person, in the real world, like we do all the time these days. Sorry, weird guys. Anyway, when you are checking out on the website, you would put in DBTME as the code to get 15% off. Or you can follow the code that we will have in the show notes. At that point, all of the browsing you do from following that link will, anything you shop from that link will get the 15% discount. So a couple of the book titles that we wanted to mention this month. One of them is The Emotion Regulation Skills System for Clients with Cognitive Challenges, 2nd edition, a DBT-informed approach by Julie Brown. And also Treating Eating Disorders with DBT by, I may not pronounce these last names correctly. I apologize ahead, folks. First name is Anita Federici, and the second name is Lucine Wisniewski. So yeah, that one I was especially excited by. I was talking about how traditional eating disorder clinics don't necessarily really serve well a population of folks who struggle with eating disorders, and also issues that really fuck with their ability to regulate. So if they have dysregulation issues. So yeah, those and many other books available again from Guilford Press. And you can get 15% off with our affiliate link. So I think I've blathered on enough about us and what we're doing. Michelle, it is your turn to launch off with a real life example. Both of us will do that, I guess, guys, just to give you kind of the bones of the episode. Michelle and I will both give some personally related story around checking the facts, and then talk about more when emotions do fit the facts, what that looks like, what it doesn't look like, and go through the actual described portions of the handout. So, All right. I'll shut up now. It's all yours, Michelle.
Thanks. Also, with those two titles that Kate mentioned, I'll make sure in our Facebook group to put the links for those two specific books. Point. So then it's easy to find them if you're interested in either of those, especially if you're a clinician, right? Guilford Press puts out, they have a lot of great books for, I guess we could say, lay people, but especially tons of great titles really geared towards.
For professionals. Yeah.
For professionals, exactly. So yeah, get your hands on those because those both sound like really great resources. So like Kate said, we thought we would kick off this redo episode of Check the Facts with naming a brief example from each of our own lives where we are aware that we could benefit from this skill. When I was re-listening to the first time we ever recorded this episode about Check the Facts, we use the example of somebody cutting you off with driving, because we use driving examples all the times for things, because it's very universal. But I thought while we're redoing it, why not make this a little more personal to our lives and how we see this skill showing up? So for me, I wanted to speak a little bit to, and I may have mentioned this here and there on the podcast before, so this might not be entirely new, but a situation that I deal with, honestly, on kind of a daily basis is thinking about how this shows up with my son, Noah, and eating. So Noah is 4 years old. He was recently diagnosed as being autistic. I just got that diagnosis confirmed at the end of 2025. And for a long time, Noah's really struggled with food. And I debated, I was like, is this just normal toddler picky eating? Is there more to this? And ultimately, I feel like with the autism diagnosis being confirmed and with having a feeding evaluation done where they were like, yeah, he's definitely a good candidate for feeding therapy, it really showed me that he's struggling with food more than we could say other 4-year-olds might be. And so on a nearly daily basis, I feel some degree of anxiety about this. Even just yesterday, he had a great day with eating. He ate an entire PB&J for lunch, an entire grilled cheese for dinner. And then still today, I went into his feeding therapy appointment and I was like, I'm just stressing about the fact that he's not eating any fruits or vegetables. Like, if I'm not stressing about the quantity of food he's eating, which sometimes is very little, I find myself stressing about, is he getting enough nutrients and things like that? And so I am having to constantly check the facts about this for myself so that my fear around his eating doesn't just completely consume me, because it really causes me a lot of anxiety. So that may be an example from my life that you hear me touching on once we actually get to the part of the episode where we are going through the step-by-step components of this skill with check the facts. You may hear me reference back to how I see that applying to me with Noah's eating. So that's the example I'm going to be working with. But Kate, what about you? What example from your life do you want to talk about?
Awesome. Michelle, it's super funny. I didn't think about it at the time when I was putting it in the notes, but our examples are just different as I initially thought. So you're talking about some of your anxiety and other emotions around Noah and eating. When I was thinking about real life examples where somewhere between I do use check the facts and I also could stand to use it more, is actually my anxiety and panic and honestly guilt. I'd say panic and guilt are the two biggest emotions around my dog Goose's needs. Though in the notes, the needs are in air quotes, and that is intentional because part of how my guilt and my panic often lead me astray in this particular example, I guess, when they don't fit the facts, they tend to be focused on things that I've kind of worked up in my head as being needs when they aren't really, and or perhaps it's something like, yes, my dog needs exercise on a, pretty much daily basis. That also being said, if he goes a day or 3 because of an injury or illness or because, I don't know, I'm injured or ill without a lot of exercise, he's also not going to die of that, right? So I think that for me, it's a matter of needing to use it to both see, like, how am I defining my terms? And is that, like, how much is my definition of need, etc., impacting how I'm feeling about this, and or whether or not the emotions are too intense, right? For instance, if we're going back to the idea of my dog needs exercise, like, sure, if I got the flu and was down for the count for like a week and he was barely getting any activity, I don't think it would be inappropriate to feel an amount of, like, I don't know, regret, guilt, sadness, something like that. Maybe a little bit of anxiety about how he's going to do when he finally does get more exercise, etc. But I don't need to be panicking, right? I don't need to be, drowning myself in guilt. So we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through the worksheet itself. But for a little sneak preview, something that's true for me a lot of the time is less that the baseline emotion maybe doesn't fit the facts, and more just how intensely I'm experiencing them is not commensurate to whatever it is that's going on. So, yep, I have been known to have, just weeping fits and just so much anxiety occasionally about this. But on my better days, I can, check the facts, reground in what a need actually is and isn't, and move forward with a whole lot less emotional intensity. So, I think that's my personal example, Michelle.
Great. So moving into the next part of the episode, this is definitely a change from when we did our original Check the Facts episode, because DBT has this whole handout of examples of emotions that fit the facts. And we touched on this briefly when we did our original episode, but we didn't take a deep dive here. And I thought today, with doing this redo episode, we should take a bit of a deeper dive. So we're going to do that before we even get into what the skill is, because Kate and I really believe that this skill of Check the Facts, it's not here to prove to you that your emotions don't fit the facts. That's not what we want you to use it for. There will absolutely be times where you may go through the Check the Facts skill and realize, my emotion and its intensity fit the facts. Or like Kate just named for herself, my emotion fits the facts, but my intensity does not. And you could have a time where the intensity and the emotion both don't fit. It could go a number of different ways, but just to really start with validating that, there will be times where your emotions do fit the facts. And let's talk from the beginning about what those are. So I'm going to go over 5 of them, and Kate's going to go over 4 of them. There's actually quite a few here.
Right, I love it.
Yeah, so we're going to go decently quickly through these. Otherwise, we could actually probably spend an entire episode here. And if you want to follow along, we are going based off of the revised edition handout. So it's Emotion Regulation Handout 8A on page 215 of the revised manual, if you've got that. So the first emotion it talks about is fear. So funny enough, Kate, I realized that you and I both picked examples from our lives where we would say, I think that the emotion that we will be working with is fear.
Ah, that's true.
Yeah, but I love that because I think above and beyond fear is, I don't think it's any coincidence that it's listed first on this handout.
Sure.
Fear is one of the emotions where Check the Facts is going to really, really, really come in handy. So they give 3 examples of where fear can fit the facts, right? When there is a threat to your life or that of someone you care about, a threat to your health or that of someone you care about, like i.e. if you have a really, scary medical diagnosis perhaps, or there's a threat to your well-being or that of someone you care about. You're actually being exposed to something that could really impact your well-being. Those are all times where, you're going to feel some fear, and it's the emotion that you probably need to be feeling to keep you safe and surviving. The next emotion they talk about is anger. I actually really like this because when I was looking at the handout, they give 4 reasons why anger fits the facts, and that's more reasons than they give for any of the other emotions. So I was like, yes, thank you for justifying why it makes sense to feel angry. So the first thing they say for anger fitting the facts is when an important goal is blocked or a desired activity is interrupted or prevented. This is why toddlers throw tantrums, everybody. Right there. That one. You or someone you care about is attacked or hurt by others. You or someone you care about is insulted or threatened by others. And then finally, the integrity or status of your social group is offended or threatened. Basically, that explains why anger is so protective, right? You're wanting to protect yourself or people that you care about in situations like that. The third emotion they talk about is disgust. So 3 reasons where disgust would be justified and fitting the facts is if something you are in contact with could poison or contaminate you. Yep, you're going to feel disgusted. Somebody whom you deeply dislike is touching you or someone you care about. And finally, you are around a person or group whose behavior or thinking could seriously damage or harmfully influence you or the group you are a part of. I love that one for disgust, personally, because I think there's a lot of times where we're feeling disgust, but we say it's anger, which it could be anger too, but that third one I think is major. Next emotion is envy. They only give one example here for when envy would fit the facts, which is another person or group gets or has things you don't have that you want or need. So that's pretty broad, but that's why we would feel envy. Jealousy is the next one. Kate often likes to point out the distinction between envy and jealousies and loves that DBT distinguishes them as 2 separate emotions as well. So with jealousy, 2 situations where it could fit the facts is when a very important and desired relationship or object in your life is in danger of being damaged or lost. So you could be at risk of losing something. Or someone is threatening to take a valued relationship or object away from you. So that's when jealousy would fit the facts. So Kate, I'll turn it over to you for the remaining ones here.
All right. The next one down here is love, which I think is fabulous because, as I'm about to talk about, there are plenty of situations where love does fit the facts, but I appreciate that implies that there are also times and places where it does not, which I think is really, not very comfortable, but really important. And I'm really glad that DBT acknowledges it. But the times and places where love does in fact fit the facts, nice, Kate, does fit the facts, would be, for instance, if loving an animal, a person, or an object enhances the quality of life for you or for those you care about. If loving a person, animal, or object increases your chances of attaining your own personal goals. So, yeah, basically, if they are helping you or those in your world have a better existence. All right, next one. It's funny, Michelle, I don't think without you calling it to my attention, I had ever before noticed just how many different numbers of things they list for whether something fits the facts or not. And I think that's kind of fascinating now as I'm noticing that as we go on. Anyway, the next one, though, in my list is sadness. And they are asserting that sadness fits the facts when you have lost something or someone permanently. Or things are not the way you wanted or expected and hoped them to be. That's a little bit of an awkward sentence. Also, that last bit is just such a large category.
That's what I was thinking. That's why they don't
need to list so many things. I'm like, my God, things are not the way you wanted. Like, yeah, man.
Well, but think about how often I think with sadness as an emotion, we tell ourselves not to feel sad, or other people in our lives tell us not to feel sad. We have so many expressions around that culturally, I think that's great that that's a broad category and so much could fall under that for why sadness is totally appropriate.
All right, but more things. That's funny. Kat and I almost exactly the same question at the same time. Probably not supposed to ask how lethal is the particular plan they're talking about. I think it's meds. Okay, on to shame. Oh, man. What does this one say before I actually read it to people?
There's just one.
That is fascinating. All right. All right, the next one down, the emotion that honestly I think probably has the worst reputation of all of the emotions is shame. And they say that shame fits the facts if you will be rejected by a person or group that you care about, if characteristics of yourself, your experiences, or your behavior are made public. And I will just put a brief aside to say I've been having some very interesting and fun navel-gazing about shame lately, and it's all I can do to keep my little neurodivergent self from going on the soapbox, but that tiny little version of one will have to do for now. And then separately, and I appreciate, just like they separated out envy and jealousy, I appreciate here that they separate out shame and guilt, though we could also have conversations about how they define them differently than I do, but stop, Kate, it's okay. We're just reading what DBT says. The last one here is guilt, and they say that fits the facts when your own behavior violates your own values or moral code.
Nice.
And as you guys will see in a little bit here as we start to talk more through the worksheet itself, what another couple of things that DBT uses to measure whether or not your emotion fits the facts is not only the base of the emotion, right? Does guilt make sense? Does anger make sense? Does fear make sense? But also the intensity and duration of an emotion, which, as Michelle was reflecting, like I was saying earlier, is where I have the most room for improvement. There we go. Dialectically, I work really hard there, and there's still room to grow. So this one says that intensity and duration of an emotion are justified by how likely it is that the expected outcomes will occur. So is your catastrophizing, for instance, something that has a 1 out of 3 likelihood or 1 out of 3 million, right? That makes a big difference. How great and or important the outcomes are, right? Is the catastrophe that, I don't know, you missed the show you've been waiting to come out all week? Or is it, grievous bodily harm? And lastly, how effective the emotion is in your life now, which I also think of sort of is if you do what the emotion is trying to get you to do, does that serve you, right? Essentially, in that moment, which is a big part of what I'm working on because I can tend to cling a bit to emotional states. So I like to look at not is the emotion itself justified, because I can often find a way to say yes to that, but this hard and this long really is a matter of efficacy for me in large part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those nuances are really important within Check the Facts of exactly. It's not just about does my emotion fit, but it really is that intensity and duration piece like you're speaking about. So before we actually start getting into the nitty-gritty steps of Check the Facts, how you do it, what this looks like, we're going to give some disclaimers and a little bit of just an overview about why this skill is important. So this is something that I have talked about on the podcast so many times, but there really is no better time to repeat it than right now with Check the Facts, which is I talk about the sequence of events that are happening all the time, which is that something happens. We think something, we feel something, we do something. This is happening every moment of every day when we are awake and alert and moving through the world. The something happening may not always be something huge or monumental, but there's something happening in our environment that we're in pretty much at all times. And we're going to continually have thoughts, which then lead to our emotions, which then lead to our responses and actions that we take with whatever the starting event was. So when we're thinking about Check the Facts, there is a handout with DBT where the way they put it is many emotions and actions are set off by our thoughts and interpretations of events, not by the events themselves.
So often.
100%. Sorry, what'd you say, Kate?
Oh, I just said so often.
So often.
The vast majority of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is why you can have multiple people experience the exact same event, but have wildly different responses to it because each of those individuals are having different internal thoughts and emotions about the event itself. So I like that DBT is talking about that, and we agree, right? the thoughts that we have and how we interpret events is really important because the thought then leads to the emotion. And that process can happen extremely quickly, very outside of our conscious awareness sometimes. So a lot of this with check the facts, yes, we are targeting what is the emotion that we're looking at here. And there's going to be a lot of talk about emotions, but really this skill is about noticing what are the thoughts we are having and how are those thoughts impacting the emotion we're feeling, the intensity of the emotion, the duration of the emotion. And if we can look at the thoughts, that's probably going to shift something about the emotion that we feel. Kate said this in the first episode that we did about Check the Facts, which is that really like DBT talks about changing emotions. And we don't actually like that. Kate was like, what if we think of it as like, instead of changing the emotion being the goal, what can we, or how could we rephrase it to like, what's the emotion that I want to examine rather than like, what is the emotion that I want to change? Because really, if you think about it, the emotion itself, emotions are not bad or wrong. We talk about this often as well. It's not a problem if you feel anger. It's not a problem if you feel fear. It really is looking at what is that emotion then leading me to do, which is where opposite action comes in. For the record, stay tuned for our next redo episode because we're not going to get too into the weeds on that today. But the action at the end of that sequence, right? The thinking, feeling, doing sequence, the doing is really important. What do you choose to do in response? If your thoughts can shift through using this check the facts skill, yeah, you may experience some emotional change, perhaps, but that doesn't even really need to be the goal to change the emotion. The emotion can stay just as it is, but if we're targeting the thoughts before it and the actions that come after it, we're hopefully setting you up to behave more skillfully in your life. So check the facts is really about targeting the thoughts here that are influencing the emotion that you're then experiencing. And I don't know, is there anything else you want to say about any of that stuff before we actually get into the steps, Kate?
Not necessarily. I'm trying to think. I love the, differentiating, what the wording is there. And I guess just noting that one way of thinking about this is like stories. I don't know if that wording comes up anywhere in the actual skill, but there's the event itself and then there's the story we're telling about it.
Yeah.
And it's okay, right? Like, I think that there can be this sense of like maybe shame. This may be a sense of shame around, or shame or guilt, I guess. Anyway, sorry. Just going back to the last handout made me think it's funny. That if we are reacting to storytelling, that is a shameful, bad, weak, juvenile, whatever you want to put it, thing, instead of just understanding that that's part and parcel to how humans go about understanding the world, unless they slow down and do it intentionally differently.
Yeah. We're constantly
just really
assumptions.
Normalizing that. Yep, we have to. My gods, think of freeways. Sweet Jesus. You cannot, in fact, think about freeways or freeways would fail, to an extent, right? Like, you've got to be making a lot of assumptions about yourself and the drivers around you to not freak out about some things. So, yeah, I think that's all I would add, but I suppose now into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
All right. So, how to check the facts. Step 1, the way it is phrased on the worksheet, is what is the emotion I want to change? But as Michelle was saying before, I don't always like this wording. I like to say instead, what emotion do I want to... Oh, my brain's giving me investigate again. That's not it. Examine.
Investigate, examine, look at.
Right, look at.
Any of the above, yeah.
Right, because it might not change, right? As also Michelle was saying, while I don't think DBT wrote it this way, this can very much be a skill used for self-validation. So you might not want to change it, but you do want to take a closer look. So, ask what is the emotion you want to investigate. If you're someone who has a hard time knowing what you're feeling, there's a lot of great places to go to start trying to learn more about that. You can go to and download for yourself like an emotion wheel and try and look at that to figure out where on that you feel some kinship to the emotions being described. Oh, shoot. I wish I had a more succinct name for these. I've only gotten shown these a couple of times by one of my clinicians who does a lot of somatic work, but they are these little body maps that show you what sort of thoughts you're likely to have with an emotion, what you might feel in your body from that emotion, and like what the needs are that emotion presents to you. Anyway, right? Isn't that so cool? But I especially like the talking about how they feel it, like how one feels it in the body. And so, if you're someone who has a hard time noticing what you're feeling, emotion wheels and or things like that, those body maps of feelings can do a lot to help start paving the road to knowing. So, yeah. Anything you'd add about that other than just be honest with yourself? There you go.
Yeah, be honest
with this.
In
fact, this is the whole thing. Be so fucking honest with this whole worksheet.
Yeah, be honest about what the emotion is. Sometimes people at this very first step will be like, well, there's more than one. I will often say pick the one that feels more charged, bigger, we could say, to work with. Sure. If you're like, I'm feeling fear and anger. Okay. Pick whichever one between those two. And then it also wants you to rate the intensity that you're feeling it from like a 0 to 100 scale.
Wait, is it there on that? Oh, am I looking at the wrong sheet now? I was just looking at the... Oh, I am. I'm just looking at the descriptions, not the actual fill it out.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Yep, we're looking at two different worksheets.
Yep. Okay, because you're looking at worksheet 5, and I thought we were looking at...
Yep, I'm looking at worksheet 5. Yeah, the worksheet 5 is the fill in the blank when you really want to write down your answers.
Now I know.
Kate's looking at handout 8.
It's true, which describes the things, but doesn't quite ask all of the different things. So, yes, we're actually walking you through it as though you were filling out the form yourself. Thank you, Michelle. I was lost there for a moment. It says, what emotion do I want to change? We say investigate. You name the emotion or pick one. Michelle, you said which one's most charged. I think the way I think of it sometimes is like, which one are you finding it harder to manage or cope with? Right? Like which one's trying to run the show more. Mm-hmm. And then, they want you to rate it on an intensity scale of 0 to 100, starting with before, like what are you feeling when you start going through the worksheet, and then come back and do that measure for yourself again, subjectively. How are you feeling after going through the whole of the worksheet? Hopefully to give you a bit of a bead on how much impact it had. Mm-hmm. Just because I'm the queen of modifying DBT a little bit here or there, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know, 100 feels too much, too big, too granular. I'm like, I don't know, what the fuck is the difference between a 87 and a 92, right? Like this. So I personally have to scale back the scale. So whatever works for you, I guess just don't feel like you're abjectly committed to 0 out of 100 as your intensity scale.
I like that.
It could be a 1 through 10 if you want
it to be.
Yep. Thank you. So that's all I think after that one, now that I'm looking at the right sheet. What is step 2, Michelle?
So step 2, you're going to ask yourself, what is the prompting event for my emotional reaction? This step 2 is really important because it wants you to describe the prompting event in great detail, being as factual as you can be. And after you write it out, because if you're doing check the facts the way that DBT intends for it to be done, you are writing out your answers on this worksheet. So after you write out your prompting event, then you want to pause, reread it, and look for extremes and judgments, they say, and the way that you're describing it, because there might be some in there. And then you want to really try to rewrite it until you could get it as factual as possible. Factual as possible, I tend to think of that as like if 100 people were observing this prompting event, would they all agree on what happened? So with going back to my real life example with Noah and the eating, I would maybe say that the prompting event would be something like, Noah didn't eat much food for dinner. Well, that's not specific enough. What does not much food mean? It might not look like much food to me, but that's my judgment, right? So how do I rewrite it factually, right? I could say something like, Noah did not take a bite of his vegetables. He ate 2 bites of strawberry and tried a bite of the pasta, but spit it out or something, right? That would be pretty factual and specific. Also, you guys might be able to hear it in the background. My daughter's getting a diaper change now on the other side of the wall, and she is rubbing her toy against it. So I apologize for that annoying sound.
That's so funny.
But that's what you want to think about. You want to really be catching your own interpretation of what the prompting event was. Like, ooh. I don't know. I'm going with another real life example for myself. I'm scared of spiders. So if I were to be like, there was a big spider on the wall. What is big? What does that mean? Right? Like, how can I be more specific and more clear with things? I don't know if you can think of it with your example of goose, Kate, but like, what would be a prompting event that you can catch for yourself where like you can recognize your own interpretations of it and how you could revise it to be really factual?
Yeah, I think for me, like, one thing that happens is, say, towards the end of the evening when my brain is telling me that the goose, you know, if he's had a good enough day that's been stimulated enough and exercised enough and blah, 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 that he will be, you know, chilling out, resting, being calm. So if he's still really being antsy pants and pacing and trying to, like, beg us for more play and bark to go outside, like if he just seems really agitated of some degree in the evening. But like, for instance, if I say agitated, that is me anthropomorphizing my dog. I don't actually know that that's correct, right? I can just describe the behaviors. And so I think, Michelle, you said something very near this, but not quite. I think another way that might be helpful for folks when they're thinking about trying to strip out the judgments or extreme language, etc., is ideally that anybody else who witnessed or engaged in that event would agree with you.
Yep.
So for instance, I don't know, even if like I have a big fear with stuff having to do with not hearing from people, but the only thing I can assert is that I do not see a text from them. I can't even assert that they didn't send one because cell phones are stupid. So yeah, I just think it's important to try and be like, all right, would other people have any problem signing off on this? If so, why? And maybe that's a place to do some editing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Great. All right, on to step 3.
All right, step 3 is, what are my interpretations? So thoughts, belief, etc. about the facts. What am I assuming? Am I adding my own interpretations to the description of the prompting event? Right, so actually some of what I was talking about just now with Goose probably fits a little bit better here. So, because for instance, I might have the belief that a well taken care of dog is relaxed in the evening. Right? Or a dog that's still moving around a lot in the evening has unmet needs, right? Or something like that. Like, where am I adding lens, right? Where am I adding interpretation as opposed to just stating dog is moving around a lot this evening, right? Like that's, oh, see, a lot. There you go, Michelle. Now I have in my brain being even more specific.
You would have to like literally describe the movements, right? Goose,
right. Or I mean, maybe be
one side of the room to the other 3 times or something, like, maybe. I don't know.
I could also imagine that being like at least described. Oh, I don't know. Like it is more than I thought, so that might not be an accurate, but an accurate description, right? Like I did not he's moving more than I thought. Anyway, I'll have to sit with that. I don't know if it works, but some part of me thinks it does. Right. So as you're going through that, I think the middle part of most of these steps is to check the facts. So, I like this one in particular because it has you list as many other possible interpretations of the facts as you can. Take one straight out of my dog trainer's mouth is, sometimes that kind of moving around is the exact opposite of being understimulated. It's actually the dog being overtired, right? Like, I think people have a more likely to have an experience of this with toddlers, Michelle, right? But when they get so tired that they get kind of ramped up, what's what I'm looking for? Not rowdy, but close.
They get like wired.
Yeah, right? There's like bang, bang, bang. So that's one thing that it could be, right? It could just be he's happy and enjoying himself, and being more active for him is what his, like, this is my end of the day looks like, right? So just recognize that whenever we're telling ourselves stories, or like we were, Michelle was talking about at the beginning with the event, thought, action, etc., that there's more than one story to be told, right? Dialectics comes into play here a lot. So trying to, if I, sorry guys, I too can make an English sentence today. If we go back to the texting example, for instance, sure, someone, I don't know, being dead in a ditch somewhere is a possible interpretation of the facts as I have them, but also dropped phone in toilet or left at work are also possible interpretations. So since we definitely story tell all the time as people, I think this step is really nice because it offers you a selection of other possible stories that I find at least does a lot to help me feel less attached to the one I'm already telling. I can be like, okay, yep, this is a story, but it's one of many. And I've, for some reason, chosen the one I'm using right now, which also implies that I can choose something else. So the end of step 3 is to rewrite the facts if necessary and try to check the accuracy of the interpretations. So if you can't check the facts, write out a likely or useful, so in other words, effective interpretation. I have a great example of this from work recently, and I can't remember what it was. It was something where I was like, we are literally never going to have our hands on the information. Like, there's no way to access this. So since we are going to be making something up anyway, why not make up a story that feels better, right? Is more effective, is more useful for moving forward, since, we don't have any way to necessarily dismiss it. So, but if you can check the facts, I don't know, for me, for instance, checking in with my dog trainer, being like, am I crazy? What does this mean? It's good to try and think about, and or if you need to look externally, try to check the facts around what your interpretations are and how likely they are.
Yeah, definitely. I think with my own example for this step 3, like, I think I will often assume that if Noah doesn't want to try a new food, even though I know it's ridiculous, I will just sometimes think like, well, then that food's off the table. Like,
oh, he'll never eat that now.
He'll just never eat it. Right? Yep. Like he will just like never, he really does not like meat at all, anywhere close to meat. And so I'm like, he's just never going to eat a hamburger. Right. Like for me, when he's not eating foods, I found that rather than just assuming, oh, it's because he doesn't like the food. I mean, which could be, again, one possible interpretation that honestly kind of makes sense and is logical. But, if I, again, kind of let that build to think like, well, he doesn't like this food, he may never like this food, I find it a lot more helpful for myself if I'm like, well, maybe he's not eating it just because he's not hungry. Or like there was a day where he was not eating anything, like none of his preferred foods. He was just not eating like all day long. And I was really freaking out. And I did not think of the possible interpretation that maybe his body isn't feeling very well. Like maybe he's sick. I just didn't think of it. I was just like blaming myself. I was like, what am I doing wrong here for why he's not eating these foods that he always eats? And then you know what happened later that evening? He threw up. So, he wasn't eating because, his body wasn't feeling well. That's why. Not because he has now all of a sudden just decided that he hates these foods and is boycotting them forever. That wasn't what was going on. But that's what I thought it was. So, coming up, like it says on the worksheet, with as many other possible interpretations can sometimes help remind us that there's a lot we don't know here. Okay, on to step number 4. Step number 4 says, am I assuming a threat? says, what is the threat? What about this event or situation is threatening to me? What worrisome consequences or outcomes am I expecting? For me personally, I really like that last question the best. What worrisome consequences or outcomes am I expecting? Now, this with Kate and I's examples, or in general, when you're doing a Check the Facts worksheet for the emotion of fear, this may seem very easily in line with that because worry is just another name for fear, right? Fear can go by all kinds of names, and worry is certainly one of them. But with any emotion that you're feeling, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whatever it is, there is probably something about that situation where there is like an element of fear at play that's impacting why you're feeling the emotion that you're feeling. If you're feeling angry about, I don't know, I'm coming up with a random example out of thin air, about there's a coworker of yours that got a promotion that you really wanted and you're pissed about it. Maybe the threat is that you're thinking like, I'm going to continue to get overlooked for promotions in the future because they got this one, right? Or something like that. For me, it's often, I was kind of actually touching on it with the last step of like, I just often worry that like, gosh, Noah's just not going to ever want to try this food again, right? Or this is a food that now he's just decided is bad and off limits, even though he used to like it. I worry that his food choices are going to get, narrower and narrower rather than growing and expanding like you would hope for a child, that they start eating more foods over time. And I worry that he's just going to start eating less and less variety of foods. So there is some kind, really, really look at it for yourself. Again, it might be super obvious or it might be really hard to detect, but this question is an important one to think about. What am I worrying about here? And then, like with the last one, it wants you to list as many other possible outcomes as you can. Think about other ways it could go. Often, I think with this step number 4, if you're going to be thinking about other possible outcomes, you're really trying to, we could say, look on the bright side a little bit, which can feel hard, but almost reminding yourself that like, okay, yeah, my brain can think about all the things that can go wrong, right? All of the worrisome consequences. Can I also think maybe about things going, quote unquote, right? Could I think about that? What else could happen here that maybe won't have the negative outcome that I'm fearing? It also says on the worksheet, when you do rewrite the facts, it says, if you can't check out probable outcomes, write out a likely non-catastrophic outcome to expect. So again, thinking about something where you're like, in a world where things might be going better, what could that look like? And think about it a little bit. Yeah, what comes up for you with this step 4, Kate, or how do you see it applying to stuff with Goose?
Yeah, definitely if I'm thinking about like worrisome consequences or outcomes, it's basically the idea of he's going to be a bad dog,
Yeah.
I won't be as welcome in other people's houses, or like he will be hard to, board or get taken care of by other people or have parties around or whatever. So that in some way he'll constrain my living, I think.
Yeah, like the threat is that he's going to like limit your social life maybe a little bit.
Just my life. Yeah, but yeah, social life.
Yeah.
But also like cleaning life. Or yeah, like it's just like how much attention he needs. Like, fuck me, how much more life do I have? And I don't know. I'll just see if I can make sense of this, Michelle, because it's still a little bit unframed. But as I was hearing you talk about, like, list as many other possible outcomes as you can, given the facts, and the like, look on the bright side. Yes, if there's bright sides to look on, I'm a big fan of noticing that not everything lands in the shit pile. That being said, I'm also the person who's like, some days are just sort of bad, start to finish. And it's okay to acknowledge them.
It might all land in the shit pile.
Right, might all live in the shit pile, but that's still important to notice that they are different piles of shit. Right? It still is, I think, because to me, to an extent, if your emotion doesn't fit the facts, what I see as part of what happens with checking the facts, the whole worksheet, is just it, in a healthy way, erodes your certainty. Right? And so even if the other possible outcomes are not necessarily good or better, even in, or much, at least you can see that they are different. And so you can, I guess just, I keep losing my thoughts in the middle tonight, guys. I'm so sorry. You can come up with as many different things, and the more there are, the less certain, you have reason to be. So that's something I think about. Also, I just think when you're talking about like maybe not so bad of outcomes, I sort of think about the catastrophe thing, which is where I'm going next, which is perfect. Because step 5 is asking, what is the catastrophe, even if the outcome I'm worrying about does occur. So if I'm up here saying like, maybe all of the options of other possibilities in step 4 are crap, then step 5 is especially important, right? So like, okay, you can only find varying degrees of negative outcomes to think about. So let's assume it does happen. What can you do? Right? Because the second half of step 5 is describe ways to cope if the worst does happen. So, keeping on with Goose, say he just remains a 70-pound tyrant of my existence. I could, describe in detail all the things that might look like for me. And then I get to tell myself ways I could handle it. Now, to note, for instance, one of the ways I could handle it would be to rehouse my dog, right? Is to give him to a family or person who's more suited to taking care of those needs or what have you. That would feel fucking awful, right? So I do want people to recognize that describing the ways to cope if the worst does happen, it might not be pleasant, right? You're not being like, how can I make this all okay, right? Like, how do I make this not at all emotionally impactful? But more just noticing that even if things are pretty fucking bad, you can still make it through. There are still options. You have choices in how you sit with what the worst is and how you cope with it. Rehoming Goose could be part of sort of the nuclear option, I suppose, in my example. I could also just need to redo my finances such that professional training or professional boarding or something like that was more a piece of my life, right? You can basically just brainstorm here in the ways to cope. But I think that a lot of us can get stuck in the asking the what if, but not answering the what if, which is technically what anxiety is meant to do, is give us some idea of how we would handle in the what if. So this means don't stop at asking, what if this terrible thing happens? Answer, okay, what if this terrible thing happens? Because the truth of the matter is we're pretty flipping resilient, and most of the time, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or orthogonal to both those concepts, we can and will cope with most of what life can throw at us. At least when we're working on check the facts. Most of those things.
Yeah.
In my experience. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're wrapping it up. You've got the last one.
I do. Yeah, I was thinking too about step 5 for myself when you were talking. I was like, what is the catastrophe? And I think this step 5 is really interesting because, sometimes we may have a catastrophe that feels like, that could happen, or a catastrophe that we're like, that sounds a little ridiculous. So I was thinking about it for myself, and I was like, what is my catastrophe that I worry about with Noah not eating, as a wide variety of foods, not a large quantity of food. What am I really worrying about? And I was like, well, I get really worried that it's going to impact his development at some point, that like his body is just not going to be getting enough nutrients, and it could really, impact his functioning. And impact him socially too. I worry about that, right? That like, what if he just really doesn't eat much in social settings with other kids, like at lunch at school or at a birthday party or whatever, like,
because food is bonding in so many ways for us socially.
Yeah, it totally is. So I'm like, wow, I worry about, him not gaining enough weight, having a healthy body that functions how it's meant to, or, not fitting in with other kids socially. But it's kind of like what you were saying, Kate, for your own ideas of like describe ways to cope. I think sometimes it really is thinking about like, well, who else would I turn to for help if that happens? And I kind of realized in a way, actually, for myself, I'm already coping in my case, right? Like I've gotten him into feeding therapy. He's in occupational therapy. Like I'm doing what I can to learn as a parent what his needs are and how to better meet them and that kind of a thing. And so I would just probably continue to do that, honestly, like keep talking with his doctor and keep exploring what our options are and things like that, and try to get him good friends, maybe some other neurospicy friends who also could have some eating sensitivity stuff going on. And, I don't know. But yeah, step 5 is so important to this process. So I just really wanted to highlight that. Before I move on to the final step, which is step 6. This is when you actually answer the question for yourself.
Drum roll,
yep,
please.
drum roll for step 6, right? Because you're going to ask yourself, does my emotion or its intensity or duration fit the facts? Now, DBT wants you to rate this on a 0 to 5 scale. 0 is not at all. 5 is I am certain. And it says, which I don't know, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of this. It says that like, if you give yourself a score of 2, 3, or 4, I don't know why it doesn't say 1, because it said 0 to 5.
That is weird.
But it wants you to keep checking the facts. I mean, you can, but I think a score of 2, 3, or 4 represents like, hey, I may be saying I can feel like, yeah, maybe my emotion fits the facts, but the intensity or duration maybe doesn't, or that kind of a thing. I don't think you necessarily need to like keep going with this until you arrive at either a not at all or I am certain. I don't think that necessarily has to be the goal. I think it just gives you really helpful information that, as we'll talk about in our next redo episode when we get to it, is maybe going to inform whether or not you then turn to some opposite action or whether you don't, or that kind of a thing. But I'm thinking about this, I don't know, for myself, continuing on with our real life examples, like does my emotion or its intensity or duration fit the facts? I think for myself, my emotion does, but definitely the intensity of it does not. Like I have evidence that shows that Noah's eating is impacting him. Like his BMI is off the charts in a way that shows that like, yeah, I mean.
On the tiny end off the charts.
Yep, the tiny end off the charts, right? Like his body is not growing at the same rate as a lot of his peers because he's not getting as much food intake, right? It is true that, he's not eating a lot of, fruits or vegetables or getting some nutrients that we get from those categories of food. He's not getting those nutrients from those food sources, right? Like that is true. And as a parent, I think it makes sense to have some amount of worry, perhaps if you see a kid that's really food adverse. But also I think a lot of times my intensity around it doesn't really fit the facts, because I could be freaking out if like he doesn't eat lunch and totally neglect the fact that like, Michelle, he ate a pretty decent breakfast and mid-morning snack. Like he's probably okay right now. So I think for me, it's really about being able to catch like my overarching fear, I think makes some degree of sense here and does fit the facts of like, I worry about what Noah's future looks like with food. But also I think in the moment, if I'm really honest with myself, I can look at the facts of, say, what he's eaten in any given day or that kind of a thing and go, yeah, he's probably okay right now. And recognize that in this moment, maybe actually the emotion itself may not fit the facts some of the time. So I know that's a really long-winded answer, and I don't even know how I would quantify that in a 0 to 5 number. Maybe I'd give myself a solid in the middle, like 3. But yeah, I can see some things that make sense about why I feel what I feel, and some things that maybe point to I don't need to worry as much about this as I do.
Yeah, what about you, Michelle? I also don't like the keep going. That does feel like you're wrong until you're either certain that you're wrong or you're certain that you're right. Right? Mm-hmm. Which seems so very undialectical, frankly. Which is just so weird to me. So I have also, I think, recalled historically having that complaint, so I'm super with you there. And I think similarly to you, I would give myself some sort of middling score, because I do think that most of my baseline emotions have that I'm feeling around this have a baseline in valid, reality, things that make sense where it fits the facts, and also in large part the intensity of the emotion and or I don't know if the duration of the emotion itself so much as the predicted duration for me. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think it's gonna be this way. I anticipate having the duration stay a long time and might take ways to try and get out, even if I don't know that that's the case because I don't give it a chance to play out. So yeah, I think that giving yourself a middling score ought to be more allowable.
Yeah. I think so too. It also says for the step 6 that I didn't mention, it leaves a spot here where you can fill in the blank of describe what you did to check the facts. I mean, you can write that in however you want to. One way that I might suggest is I feel like with these steps, right? So we have step 2 of writing out the prompting event, step 3 of asking what are my interpretations, thoughts, and beliefs about the facts. Step 4 is am I assuming a threat? Step 5 is what's the catastrophe? I think it might be helpful to reflect back on each of those steps and just maybe think if there was one that really stood out to you as you were walking your way through them. And maybe making a note of that, of it was this question. It was this step in the process where I started to have things become a little more clear. Either become more clear in the sense of yep, this is fitting the facts, or become more clear of maybe this doesn't fit as well as I thought it did. So that could be something you can fill in the blank there on is which step really impacted you the most when you were filling it out. Just a random thought there.
Yeah, I like that. That gives it sort of a quicker way to maybe get to the heart of the situation. Mm-hmm. For folks. I definitely have my own one of those, though now that I think about it, I'm not sure which step would it technically count as. It's probably somewhere around the interpretation. So probably step 3 if I have to assign one of the 2 through 5 steps to be most like what I'm trying to condense or boil down here. But the way that I give myself a shortcut, excuse me, for doing check the facts is to ask myself the question, what do I actually know? Being incredibly stringent on the definition of the word know in this case, not what's my best educated guess, not what would my prior experience tell me is likely, not, right? None of the stuff that isn't here and now and tangibly real. And that is usually enough for me to start seeing just how deep the layer of storytelling is on top of the tiny nugget of whatever it is I actually know. And that helps for me shake up my certainty when necessary and or helps me be like, nah, I'm good. Right? In the times when my emotions or its intensity do fit the facts. So yeah, that's definitely a way I like to shortcut it for myself. Do you have one, Michelle?
Yeah. I mean, I think one possibility for a shortcut there is kind of actually what I was just saying of I think you can think about the different prompting questions throughout the worksheet of,
Sure.
what are my interpretations? What's the threat? What's the catastrophe, et cetera. And if there's just asking yourself only one of those questions is you checking the facts.
Sure.
I think Kate and I are really big on, which is why we wanted to include some suggestions here before we wrap up the episode of yes, ideally, how do you do this skill? You pull out a worksheet, you sit down with a pen and you write it out. That's how DBT designed this skill, is to design it as a worksheet that you complete. But you certainly can, be utilizing this skill even just by asking only one question. So sometimes I'll encourage people to do that. It's just pick one. It's okay if you don't remember all 6 steps. Pick one step that you want to remember to think about for yourself that feels really impactful. For me, if I had to pick one,
there you go. That's what I was asking you all along.
Oh, sorry. I totally misunderstood. I thought you were asking me, what's a suggestion you have for listeners for how they can, shortcut their way with Check the Facts?
Nope.
Okay. I will get to what you were truly asking me then, Kate, which is I think mine would be what's the catastrophe?
Okay.
A lot of times when I find myself getting to that step in the process of Check the Facts, that's when it really hits me of is this catastrophe actually likely? And I love the prompt of describe ways to cope even if it happens. That I think is really powerful to remind ourselves that even if the worst of the worst occurs, we are still able to then decide what we do in response and hopefully to make a pretty wise mind choice of what we would do next. So that step, I love that one personally out of the different steps.
Wonderful. I like that one too, but it is not my own personal shortcut. All right. I think that brings us to the end. Yeah. I'm excited to redo opposite action, if I'm being honest. So I'm excited. I like doing this new process.
Once we get to that redo? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it too. Because, again, Check the Facts and opposite action are friends. So stay tuned for when we get to that redo episode down the line.
Yep. And if you want to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, or be part of the community for the podcast, you can join our community on Facebook and or email us, dbtmepodcast@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Time for closing moment now, I think.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, everyone. As per usual, we're going to start by just finding a way to be comfortable. You might be sitting, standing, laying down, whatever feels good and right in your body today. And if you're safe and feel comfortable doing so, I invite you to close your eyes. To begin with, we're just going to notice our breath. Noticing the rhythms and the sensations of your breath. And letting it welcome you into your body and into the present moment. I'd like you to, for our exercise tonight, take a moment to think about a time in the not too distant past when, having heard about checking the facts, you would guess maybe your emotion or its intensity or duration did not actually fit the facts in the end. Try not to think about anything too intense, right? We're not trying to leave you guys emotionally dysregulated at the end. So something that's in the mild to mild end of moderate. And just take a moment to try and bring that example to mind and notice what you feel about it. What's your knee-jerk reaction when you think about that experience and sitting with and realizing that perhaps your emotions didn't fit the facts after all? It's super common for folks to feel guilt or shame or fear or just so many different things. But the thing that I would ask you to try and find and focus on would be kindness towards yourself for this. One of the reasons that this is a skill at all that's included in DBT is because this is a thing people struggle to do. Our emotions are always coming through ourselves, and ourselves can't get rid of our biases, and our biases mean we're going to be wrong sometimes. And so can you, in this moment, reach for at least a spark, if not an ember or a bonfire's worth of kindness and acceptance for yourself? Normalize having the experience of an emotion that doesn't fit the facts. Because from that space of self-compassion and kindness around it, you're much better equipped to inquire about, to investigate, or even take action on your emotions in the future, or checking the facts and seeing when not to. So just sitting with that for a moment. Noticing how you felt initially, seeing how difficult it is or isn't to reach for kindness towards yourself, and making at least some effort to do so, to bring kindness into that internal monologue about the subject at hand. But for now, when you're ready, you can go ahead and set imagining that scenario aside and take a moment to really deliberately try and let go of whatever that brought up for you and come back home into your body and into your emotions of the moment. You might do this by focusing in and taking some deliberate, slow, deep breaths. You might do this by moving or stretching, or in other ways accommodating your body and becoming more aware of it. Just taking some time to put down what you were sitting with and come back into the truth of your moment. And when you found that, I invite you to go ahead and open your eyes. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBTME podcast.